Are you a woman in the corporate world, striving to break barriers, challenge unconscious bias, and lead the way for women in leadership roles globally? If so, this is the podcast for you. Introducing Leading Ladies Who Lunch. The lunch hour is usually the time when colleagues get together for real, honest conversations about work, life, and everything in between. In each episode of Leading Ladies Who Lunch, we'll delve into insightful discussions and share actionable strategies to help you navigate corporate life. Co-hosted by me, Cicy George, a leadership development architect and inspirational speaker. I'm thrilled to share my experience and expertise on leadership, mentorship, and organizational intelligence to help you own your career.
And me, Rachel Lounds, CEO and founder, imposter syndrome expert, and mindset coach at Rachel Lounds Coaching and Consulting. Passionate about helping women conquer imposter syndrome and unleash their inner confidence to get the recognition and promotions they deserve.
Jam-packed with insightful conversations, expert advice, and inspiring stories from a diverse group, we'll explore how to overcome obstacles, shatter those glass ceilings, and build unshakable mindsets to unlock your true potential. So whether you're sipping a coffee or enjoying a meal at your desk, tune in for a no-host bar lunchtime chat. Episodes will be dropped every 2 weeks. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
Leading Ladies Who Lunch, empowering women, one conversation at a time.
Hello, and welcome back to the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast. We are so excited to be joined by Mimi Nicklin. Mimi, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here with us today.
Thank you for having me. Hello, good morning, good evening.
Right? All right. Well, brief introduction. It actually is meant to be brief, but it's quite extensive, actually. With the goal of reconnecting 1 million people in empathy everywhere, Mimi Nicklin is an internationally best-selling author and the multi-award-winning founder of the world's widest-reaching empathy training and engagement platform. Ranked as the #1 workplace well-being leader in Malaysia on LinkedIn by Favicon, Mimi is a top 5 rated podcast host for her show, Mimi UU. She is omnipresent in the media, including recently appearing live on the BBC to 85 million people. Having recently appeared on stage with Bill Gates, she is an experienced executive coach and the globe's leading thought leader advocating for the movement to create more empathy in the world. She's also trained over 18,500 plus professionals from Fortune 500 organizations globally in listening-led leadership and was recently awarded Malaysian Female Leader 2024 and Top 45 Sri Lankan Leader 2024. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. Amy specializes in listening-led, empathetic leadership, multi-generational engagement, psychological safety, and inclusion and well-being. She is as charismatic as she is passionate, and she is set on reconnecting our world one organization at a time. Mimi, that was a mouthful. I need to catch your breath.
I didn't expect you to read it all. We could edit half of it out.
Why would we do that when you're so amazing? Yeah.
I know. Our listeners have to know how amazing you are.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, Mimi. It's really nice to meet you, and you really are quite incredible. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Even when I hear it, maybe it's a really female thing, but I'm like, did I do that?
Yeah.
Me? Did I do those things,
Who are you talking about? Yeah.
Wait, I'm sure the bio said Mimi right now. I'm kidding.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe just some other person that turned up for breakfast today.
Well, I am personally very excited for this conversation because I have actually been thinking a lot the last few years about empathy and leadership. And at the time that this had crossed my mind, I wasn't really finding anyone who had specialized in this area. So why don't we just kick off the conversation right there? We can have our listeners get to know you a little bit more, actually. You have been a strong advocate for empathy and leadership, and it's a topic that I can say all of us are very passionate about. But I'm curious if there was a pivotal moment in your career where you realized the importance of empathy in the workplace.
Yes and no. Yes, there was a pivotal moment. It wasn't really necessarily in my career. You know, Cici, people are always asking me, how did you find your purpose? And I
Right.
always tell them I didn't. It found me. You know, it wasn't like I was looking for this thing. Um, but the short version of that story was that in 2018, I moved to Dubai to take over a regional CEO role of an advertising agency, which is where I spent most of my career in advertising.
Oh, me
And
too.
yes, there
Yeah.
you go. Oh, you've got a whole different conversation we can have.
Yeah.
So I got there to the Middle East. I had never lived in the Middle East before. I was a single mum at the time. I had a baby, and this business that I took over was actually basically bankrupt, but they didn't tell me that. So
Oh,
that was a nice surprise. And
guys, we're broke.
and the reality is that I had come from really corporate roles, with, you know, many people in finance and procurement, and just surrounded by leaders and support and departments, basically. And when I got to this role, I was suddenly thrown into kind of a small business. Right, we were about 40 people. And I was supposed to turn this business around, but the reality was I'd never run a small business. You know, I had never been responsible from everything from like P&L to everything else.
Right.
Um, so safe to say I was pretty overwhelmed. I didn't really know what I was doing. So I went to see a business coach just for some advice to say, you know, what is going on over here? And, you know, Dubai 2018, it was a very different place
Yeah, yeah.
from Dubai 2025, right? It's just changed insurmountably in that time. But when I met with this coach, we had a coffee, and she was asking me about my leadership style, and I was talking about intuition, and she
Mm.
stopped and she asked me a question, which in the end was that moment you were asking about, Cici, because in the end it changed my life. She said, Mimi, is it intuition you're using, or is it empathy? And at the time, I was like, no, it's not empathy. Right? What's empathy got to do with anything, you know? Now it feels such a strange thing to think. But I left that meeting and I discovered something called the empathy deficit, which is the lack of
Oh,
connectivity in the world, the lack of understanding in our world, which shows that our empathy levels have declined by 48% in 3 decades.
Mm.
And safe to say that the short end to that story is that I just could not believe that nobody was talking about this. I felt like I had discovered like a mountain of problems. And like you said, Cece, no one was talking about it. So I thought, oh, well, maybe I will. And then I did.
Amazing.
wow, that's amazing. And I'm so glad that you did because you were right. At the time that I started to look into this, it might have actually been around 2018, 2019. It was definitely before the pandemic because after pandemic this became more the forefront. But at
Yeah.
the time that I was thinking about it, I wasn't finding anyone who was having this conversation. And in
Mm.
fact, people were shying away from conversations like that. So glad
Yeah.
you took that brave step.
Yeah, totally. That's super interesting. I mean, you're talking there about declining empathy levels and skyrocketing levels of burnout and loneliness epidemic. In your speeches, you kind of and your work, you talk about this leading to like $9 trillion in lost productivity over the last 3 decades, now,
Yeah.
which is huge, right? So when you actually present these stats to corporate leaders, I'm really fascinated by this. What is their response, and then how do you position what you do to them in a way that gets them to then take action? Because empathy is
Ooh,
one of those things that people are like not
right.
interested, right? Yeah,
I think an nice to have, not a need to have.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, Rachel, it's a really good question. I think generally, especially now, so things have changed. You know, when I started this in 2018, I mean, there was, as we were saying, nobody was talking about this.
Mm.
I remember, I think I had 300 connections on LinkedIn then, right? I was barely using LinkedIn. And to give just some
Yeah,
context to that, when my team presented my statistics to me last week, so end of last week, we did our quarterly review.
yeah.
We reached just under 2 million impressions
Wow.
in the first 3 months of the year.
Mm.
Right now, that's not me, that's empathy, right? That is the content. Because all I share, I don't share about me, all I share is about empathy. And so you've gone from 300 people
Yeah.
to 2 million who are engaging with that content. So part of the answer to your question is that it's changing, right? That people are like, like Cicy, you just said, there's an awareness now, things are changing, people are noticing the role of these skill sets in the workplace. So on the whole, I guess the events that I speak at, the stages that I'm on, the fact that they invited me there means that there is, at least at the top, some level of openness to that conversation. That doesn't mean that there's not skepticism. It doesn't mean that I don't work really hard to convince them. But to your point around the data, they are really, really big numbers. And often what I'll see is, when they come up on the stage, all the phones come up, to take those screens. Often I present to HR people and you can sort of see what they're thinking, like, oh my gosh, I must tell my boss this, because they are really big numbers. Like you were saying, we're losing nearly $9 trillion a year in lost revenue, which is equal to 9% of GDP globally. 9% of global GDP due to disengagement, disconnection, presenteeism in the workplace. So we have nearly 80% as an average across the world. People are disengaged at work. 80%.
That's huge. And the minute you present a stat like that, it's like, obviously, most CEOs, corporate leaders, they're all about the revenue, the bottom line, all that kind of thing. The minute you present a stat like that, they're like, wait a minute, what?
Right.
I've got to listen. What does that mean? How do I solve that? What does that look like? And then that's where you can obviously then present like how you work with companies in order to resolve that, right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Those stats do make a difference. Although, shall I tell you a scary one?
Go on.
This one's a fraud. 52% of CEOs acknowledge or recognize that their workplace is toxic.
But don't do anything about it.
You're the CEO, right? So how is
It's your job.
Recognizing it.
It's like that is completely your responsibility. You do nothing about it. That awareness is key.
It's mad, right? So of course the data doesn't have a little asterisk that says, and they're doing nothing. But the context is that, right?
Yeah.
Half of CEOs, these are Fortune 500, recognize what my business is toxic. Well, don't just recognize it.
Right.
Do you think it's because they don't know what to do about it, though? Do you think that might be part of the problem?
I think it's actually more than part of the problem. I think it's a huge part of that problem.
Yeah.
I think as well for leaders today, and I sometimes I get quite a lot of backlash on this comment, but I stand by it anyway. I feel quite sorry for leaders at the top because I think, if you look back 10 years ago, we were pretty much responsible for, revenue, stakeholders, shareholders, culture, and your clients. Pretty much. I'm oversimplifying, but do you know what I mean? It was a relatively stable ecosystem. Fast forward. Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm so sorry to edit that out. My puppy is literally pulling apart my sofa.
No worries.
I'm so sorry that's never happened, but he has literally ripped open I suddenly heard a noise. Okay, sorry, editing team. Back to it. Here we go. Yes, I do think, Rachel, that is not just part of the problem. I think it's actually a huge amount of the problem. And sometimes I get a lot of backlash for this, but I stand by it anyway, because I feel very sorry for leaders. I think if we look back just a few years ago, they had 4 sort of areas to look after, right? Their stakeholders and their shareholders, obviously their revenue, their culture and their customers. And whilst I'm oversimplifying that a little bit, it was really quite straightforward. But you look at what they're supposed to be responsible for today when it comes to inclusion and women's rights and menopause and menstruation and maternity and paternity and inclusion and diversity, which I know Cicy is a bit controversial in the US right now. But the reality is these are all specialisms, and that's before you get to well-being.
Yeah.
But that's the same leader that just a few years ago probably had never heard of those terms. So yeah, I mean, I'm not taking away their responsibility to fix it, but I do feel for them that they do have, like you said, they just probably don't have the mind space or the skill sets to necessarily turn it around as quickly as we would like.
And I think the reason why, empathy is one of those things that falls under the quote unquote soft skills. And the reason why these soft skills are not controversial, but just maybe people shy away from them is because they're so hard to measure. How do you actually measure these soft skills? If you're seeing a leader improve in one of these areas, how do you quantify that? And
Mm,
that's what leaders want to know. They want to see the quantifiable numbers behind improvements made in this area.
mm,
One thing I was curious about is that I've noticed you're placing a lot of emphasis on what you call listening led leadership.
yeah.
And that particularly caught my attention, and I was really intrigued by this idea. Can you tell us more about what that means and how leaders can cultivate their listening skills?
Yeah, gosh, I have so many things to tell you, but let me answer a couple of your points there really quickly. The first thing I want to say is that they're definitely not soft skills. You're absolutely
That's
right.
good.
People
Yeah.
call them that, right?
Yeah.
Um, but they're not, and they're hard to find, hard to master, and they have hard business impact. So, for example, when you have high levels of empathy and culture, you'll see up to 23% higher profit. So, the first part is to tell the world every day these are not soft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The second part is yes, they're really hard to measure. But the way I approach that, CC, is to use all the data from many really reputable organizations like Gallup and Mercer and all of these guys who are tracking when these soft skills, hard skills, improve in the workplace, what that impact is on terms of, output and engagement and profit and all of these things, right? All of these really tenure, for example. And why I think listening led leadership is the answer is that fundamentally what we know is that when people feel heard, they
Mm,
rise.
yeah.
So, put really simply, when we listen to people, they do better in all areas of life and work. So,
Mhm.
listening and leadership is fundamentally a leadership approach that says, in order to lead, you need to first listen. And I often ask my audiences,
Mm,
think of a leader anywhere in life, university, work, community, the church, it doesn't matter, right? Any leader that you follow or respect or like. Why? Ask yourself why. And 99.9% of the time, the answer will come back to some form of because they listened to me, they respected me, they were interested in me, they heard my opinion.
Mhm.
So there are many definitions of leadership, but for me, it's super simple, right? To lead, somebody must be following. Because if they're not coming, you're just walking, right? You're not leading anything. Um,
love that.
what I believe is that we, fundamentally all leadership is based in listening, and I use a huge amount of data to convince, to share with my
Mm,
audiences as to why that is. And the last thing I'll say is that honestly, when I do these keynotes and workshops, in everyone at some point, either in the Q&A or afterwards, someone will come to me and say, Mimi, I just realized I haven't listened to anyone for my whole life. And I'm
oh,
like, yeah, you're not the first.
Wow.
well.
And you just help them to become a better leader.
It
Oh,
sounds so simple, doesn't it? Like people do just want to be heard. Like it is a very
Right.
simple concept. And when we are heard, we do, we respond in a way that's
Mhm.
positive because now we feel like we connect, that we belong, that we're part of something because somebody cares about us enough to listen to us. It's
Right.
really that simple, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow, I love that. And I love that like if you if no one's following, you're just walking.
Walking alone. Have fun
So good.
on walking alone.
exactly right. But I mean, I think we make it so complicated. I think I wrote this on LinkedIn last week, but we make leadership so complicated. There's so many like definitions and facets, and like we said earlier, there's so much for these leaders to try and work out. Well, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
But in the end, if they're not coming with you, you're not leading them anyway.
Yeah.
So surely that is the core to this, right?
Right.
Just leverage the skills that bring people with you.
Yeah.
And then the rest should be, I don't know, at least a bit easier.
Yeah, very important points. I love that. I love the way you've kind of simplified it in that
Mhm.
way. One of the things that obviously leaders are having to deal with right now is the back to work, back to office initiatives, right? Which has been met with a lot of resistance lately because, I think you said in one of your pieces of communication that, we're a social species. We're meant to collect and collaborate and work better. We work better together. So the COVID years really created this remote working beast. But like, how do leaders, individuals, corporates navigate the balance when it comes to the companies calling their workers back to the office? What do you suggest as a way forward?
Mhm.
Well, surprise, surprise, but I think listening is probably the path in
Yes.
that, right? They need to have conversations with these people because I think so much of this is a one way narrative and it's creating obviously chaos and pushback and all these things. So I have my own opinions as to whether people should or shouldn't be in the office, depending on roles, depending on levels, all kinds of things. I think it's very multifaceted. But
Yeah.
Mhm.
to answer your question, I was speaking to someone last week and he said, listen, in my company, we have to be in the office. That's our decision, right? That as a leadership team in the business we're in, the category in, we decided long ago, we want our people here. We
Right.
understand that is not right for many people. They don't want to be here, but we
Mm.
tell them that in the interview, right? So we say to them, please know there's many things we offer and there's many forms of flexibility and human-centered policy and all those things, but we believe that we should be on the office and we really want you here.
Right.
So that's who we are, right? So
Yeah.
I think that part of it's around communication and part of it's just around listening to why people might not want to be in the office, right?
Mm.
So I think that there's this narrative around like, oh, people are lazy or they can't be bothered to commute. But in the end, most people, not all, that want to work from home, it's because they have, a caregiver role or something. There is something that has changed the way that they're able to commute or to move, through life.
Yeah.
So I think it does come down to understanding. Some people will do their best work in that environment, but if that organization has a culture that, requires you to be there, I
Mm.
understand that
Mm.
too. So I think like most things in life, it's a dialogue, right? We just like the media
Yeah.
to create havoc out of all these conversations. Whereas actually, if they just had the conversations, some people would go back and some people wouldn't, and it would be fine.
I
Right.
think what you've said there is really fascinating about like some companies are really struggling to navigate this because, there's that whole like we want to support our people, but also like fundamentally what you said quite interesting there was that if you are a company that really does value having people in the office, then you have to be very, very clear about that.
Right.
Um, and that's the communication part. It's like, if you want to work here, we would love to have you here, but this is how we work. And if that doesn't fit you, then maybe we're not the right company for you. And
Right.
actually being like honest about it rather than like dancing around the situation and pretending that we do allow for flexibility when we really don't, So
Right.
yeah.
And with the understanding that, things happen and there may be nuances to that, like being a caregiver or what have you. I think going back to what you said, having that dialogue is what's going to be really important. And,
Mm.
It's
empathy
the same
shows
for
up in those
everything,
cases. It
right?
is.
Whether it's going back to work or it's like getting a divorce, right? Where whatever spectrum of communication you are on, being able to listen to each other, being able to understand each other
Yeah.
is like the turning point for everything.
Yeah.
And like I
Mhm.
said earlier, I think we make it really complicated. And then as we stop communicating, of course, as empathy goes down, conflict rises, right? Segregation, isolation
Mm.
rises. When empathy is low, all of the isms, racism, ageism, sexism, nationalism, whatever they are, go
Yeah.
up.
Mm-hmm.
So even in these conversations, it can very quickly become, oh, well, they're saying that because they're old. Well,
Right.
actually, they're like 46. They're not that old, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but as soon as the communication fails, as soon as two sides are not listening, or two or more sides are not listening to each other, it creates that space for havoc, for segregation, for isolation, for conflict in all areas of life. Like I said, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if it's marriage or parenting, or being in the workplace. So yeah, basically, we just need to listen more, and then the media would have nothing to hide.
Yeah.
You
Very
know,
true.
it's interesting what you're saying about when empathy goes down, all the isms start to really surface and
Mm.
explode. And I know that just from your bio and everything you've done, you've worked with so many different organizations and people from various cultures around the world. I'm curious, how have you noticed if cultural differences affect how leaders incorporate empathy into their practice? And how can they work to navigate such differences? What have
Mm.
you noticed?
Look, I think the simplest way to sort of, I don't know, separate the world is into very high context and low context societies. So high context societies tend to be across Asia, Africa, Middle East. Low context tends to be US, Europe, Canada, Australia,
Yeah.
the more, I guess, like Western parts of the world.
Mm,
And in, again, like massive stereotypes here, right? But for the sake of a podcast, if you separate the world into those two, which used to be called developing and developed nations, right? Like just very roughly, you will see that really big contextual difference. And let me tell you a sort of a story for that, right? So you might be working in, I don't know, in Africa, for example, and within the organization, you have a boss and that's your boss, and you report into them, and there's very clear, structure there. But when you go home at the weekend in your town, your father is the king of the town. So actually you are not the boss, but you are far more senior to him in the real world. Now that creates huge complexity, right? Because Monday to Friday, I'm supposed to report to you, but then, outside of that little context, your dad is the king, right?
Yeah.
So it's super complex. That's why they call it high context, right? There's a lot around that. There's a lot of the way you speak, the way you can manage a room, right? So yeah, I think that the simplest way to look at that, Cicy, is around high versus low context. You also see it in collectivism versus individualism. So also the split tends to be the same, although there are some shifts. So for example, Japan is a very individualistic society, but also sits on the high context culture. So there are some outliers, but when we have very individualistic societies, which again tend to, you see those in the US and Europe and Australia more so, you will see very different levels of empathy in the way people engage. For example, in some of those cities, you'll see up to 43% of those cities as solo dwellers, so people living alone. They get up alone, they eat breakfast alone, they go to work alone, they go home alone, they work Netflix alone, they go to bed alone. Like that's just their lives, right? They just work and do it all on their own. So of course that
Are you looking into my life? That's my life.
Yeah, I am sharing. Like somebody maybe like Rachel. So how we build connections in those cities is of course very different. You could go into many cultural nuances, how we use eye contact in different countries, or hand signals, or proximity, right? There are some cultures. So I'm in Malaysia. I live in Malaysia. I spoke yesterday on stage, and Malaysia is made up of three different backgrounds, right? So we have Indian Malaysians, Chinese Malaysians, and Malay Malaysians.
Yeah.
They come with their own contexts and histories and cultures and languages and it's like one of the most inclusive countries in the world, right? Phenomenal place. But when people come to give me feedback at the end, you can, even though they're all Malaysian, they all have Malaysian passports, okay? Yeah. How they say thank you to me or greet me or respond to me is different based on those cultural norms, even within one country, right? So that empathy will come across differently. So, for example, the Indian women, I get massive stereotypes, but this is just what happened yesterday. The Indian women want to hug, right? And they'll say, can we hug you? I'm like, yeah, you can hug, right? But that's not the same necessarily in the Chinese culture, which might be a bit more formal and shake hands. Right? So how you show connection is also very different, just based on your upbringing, what your parents did, what your culture does. And that can be within one country, let alone in between countries. So it's a pretty dynamic, landscape.
Cultural nuance everywhere.
That's fascinating, though. I mean, just the wealth of knowledge just from your response there to understand the high context, low context, the kind of cultural norms that, exist within those societies. It's so interesting to see how empathy shows up. And not that it's necessarily bad culture to culture, but just how it's different and how we can appreciate those differences.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I would say, which I think is super important, is that underneath it all, we're all exactly the same.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yes, there are differences. Of course there are. And to show respect, you have to do things differently. So you'll see pictures of me on my Instagram and I'm in the Gulf and I will be fully covered, no hair, no skin, nothing, fully covered, right? I don't have to do that, right? There is no rule to say when a Westerner, a non-Muslim, goes to the Gulf, she must cover her hair. No. I do it for them because I want to be with them, right? It's not a rule, it's a choice. So whilst you might do things differently to fit in, underneath all of that, everybody's exactly the same, right? Beautiful. We all want to be loved. We all want to fit in. We all want not to be alone. We all want to be understood and heard and cared for and to laugh and to have joy and to grow and to succeed. That's humanity for you. So I also just wanted to say that, Cicy, because you can get so caught up in all the differences that it can make us feel really different. But even though countries will tell me, like, aren't we so unique here? And I'm like, yeah, you totally are. But I'm also thinking, and they are, but I'm also thinking, not as much as you think. Right? Because that experience, often it's women that say that to me, and it's often in the context of her home life. And so, for example, Indians and Sri Lankans, they feel, and they are, very culturally different. But when they tell me that, often the context of the thing that they're telling me and the story they're telling me is actually exactly the same in the nation that they're talking about.
Right.
So I say that, there's so much up here that makes us unique, and that is phenomenal. But there is so much down here that just makes us human and makes us all the same.
That's
It's
true.
beautiful.
We all put our knickers on the same way, don't we? We all put our legs.
As an Indian American, I fully appreciate
So
that.
write it down. Yeah. No, I love that.
I don't even know the word knickers. Do you know
I
the
don't
word
know.
knickers in the US?
What did I
We
say?
just call it panties.
Hands.
Panties, there we go.
So
Cultural
weird. I find that
differences.
weird.
Knickers is so funny. It's so cute hearing you say knickers.
Knickers. Yeah.
Such a British word.
It really is. All right. I mean, switching gears, because I love to do that. I just did notice on your information that you have a keynote on the power of AI starts with empathy. Now, I'm really fascinated about your take on this. As you know, AI is everywhere now. So, how does AI and empathy work together, and how can people use AI in a more empathetic way in their work?
Great question.
Look, yeah, it is a great question. Thank you. I think first of all, acknowledgement. Yes, it's everywhere, right? You literally cannot get through a meeting without people
Yeah.
talking about AI. So I kind of hope we get a bit bored of it, because I'm already a bit bored of it, to be honest. Like, I think it's a great tool. I think it holds phenomenal power for our future. But I also think we need to acknowledge the fact that it's humans that are training it. So we should probably focus on the human skills as well, right? The AI can only become as intuitive, empathetic, kind, whatever you want it to be, as the people that are teaching it to be so, because it's a machine, right? So that would be the first thing I'd say. I think, and I do see a slight shift in that narrative, which is why I'm asked to do keynotes on it. To say, yes, we need AI, and I use it every day. Like, Canva is literally my best friend, right? The tools on Canva AI changed my life. I use ChatGPT for summarizing calls and all kinds of things, right? So phenomenal supporter of it. I guess the question is, Rachel, can AI empathize? And most people say no, but I say yes. I think it definitely can. And I think
Yes.
I think that it should. No, but I think that it's really good. And I think we're very scared, especially anybody that's over the age of 40. We're very, very scared of AI because we think it's going to steal us. But the reality is, as I said at the very beginning, we have lost 48% of our empathy in the last 3 decades. It is hugely detrimental to our lives, to our work, to our children. The second biggest killer of our youth is no longer vehicle accidents, it's suicide, right? Our children are literally choosing not to stay on the planet with us because they don't think they have a place, they don't belong, we don't understand them, we don't get them, right? So, not that I'm saying that AI can turn around some of these huge social chasms in our lives, but if AI can play a role in reaching some of the people in the world that need to be heard, where the humans around them are doing a poor job, because most of us are, then please, AI, step in and do that.
Yeah.
So if you think about one of those AI bots on like an airline website, and you're like complaining because your flight was late and you want a refund or whatever.
Yeah.
Very quickly, people are like, no, I can't believe you said that. I do deserve a refund. It was over 4 hours late. And you're like, that's a bot, right? It's literally giving you programmed answers, right? So what you see within 3 minutes, the research shows, people forget that it's a bot and they talk to it like a human.
Yeah.
That's why people get so upset with bots, right? That clearly just keep writing back, Cicy, I'm sorry. Could you rephrase that for me, right? And you're like, no. So, AI can empathize. And I think if you imagine, for example, a young woman in a rural community in anywhere, Latin America, Africa, right? Let's say Kenya. And we have this smart, amazing 20-something woman, and she wants to be a doctor. But her parents were farmers. So her parents know nothing about formal education or going to university. Her whole context has been her town that she's grown up in. She doesn't know anyone that became a doctor, but she feels that's her calling. But she has no one to talk to, because who's she going to ask about that? Now, if she can come online, yes, it's a bot, but say, could you help me understand career paths for young Kenyan females and how they became doctors,
Yeah.
well, that might change her life.
Yeah.
So why would we not want it to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And why are we so scared about it fulfilling the skills that we can't be bothered to use? Because fundamentally, that's why people don't use empathy. They don't have time, they don't have awareness, they don't care.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah.
So if people are failing, then please let the machine succeed.
Yeah.
Because our people need it. Right?
Yeah.
This young lady in Kenya has never heard the word coach. She's never going to meet a coach. She's probably never going to even come across the concept of coaching. But she could access, which is fundamentally coaching, through an AI bot and grow and understand that actually there's a grant in 2 cities away that nobody ever told her. And actually she can get a bus for a few hours and change her life.
Wow.
So that's what I believe, Rachel. I think there's huge potential, but of course we have to be careful how we roll it out.
Yeah,
Right.
well, when you put it like that, yeah, great. I mean, I think as you know, Cicy and I, a couple of women in our 40s, we might have a kind of closed off kind of perspective on AI because you know, like obviously the younger generation are growing up with AI, and they are becoming. You know, I spoke to a girlfriend of mine in London the other day, and she said, "Oh yeah, I've got like." Scarlett, she's got a daughter, Scarlett. She said one of the guys she goes to school with, he's 16. He's earning $50,000 a month because he's doing AI marketing for a company in the US. And I said, "What?" And then someone else is like, they've done AI animations, and they're like one of the most sought after animators in Europe, and they're 15. So we are well behind in our generation.
Right.
But obviously AI is very important for the younger generation. And when you put it like that, Mimi, like somebody being able to find out the information so that that could change their lives, and that's a different thing, isn't it?
I think how we use it. I mean, one of the areas that I guess am confronted with it daily on a far less profound level is on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So the amount of commenting and captioning that people are obviously writing on AI. And every day nearly somebody is talking about it on there, whether they like it, hate it, or otherwise.
Yeah.
And we have on my, or I say I have, but I have a girl that helps me manage my page. So we have like a group of people who are extremely loyal to me. I'm sure they're absolutely lovely, right? They're always there, right? Nearly every day. And they follow and they share and they encourage me, all these things. But this group, I know they are not writing those captions, right? I can tell because this is my job. So I know that AI wrote them. Someone asked me in my wider team, doesn't it irritate you that you are replying? Because I reply to every comment personally. So you are taking your time at like 11 at night every night to reply to someone who wrote to you with AI.
Yeah.
And I said to her, well, no, because they still made the effort to write it. So they still had to read my post, I don't know, copy and paste it, put it into ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT to answer me these, and then copy and paste it back to me. So they still are engaging. Maybe they don't speak great English. Maybe they're very low in confidence. I don't know the reason they're doing it, but they're still doing it. So I also think there's like a murky balance as to where those lines are, because I understand why people get really upset. It is quite annoying. You know, it is quite annoying when people just copy and paste these like,
yeah, they're
let's
weird. They're kind of
that.
weird. I get a few of them, and I'm thinking that's AI. That's so. All you've done is summarize my piece of content and put it into a comment.
The sentence that starts with the word "let's" or "this reminds me of."
Yeah.
Those are like the two giveaways.
Telltale.
You know it's Jack.
Yeah, there's a lot of calling out of AI on LinkedIn at the moment, but it's getting a little bit boring. So hopefully we'll move on soon. Conversation.
It'll Well, gosh, I mean, this has been an amazing conversation. I feel like we could have chatted with you for hours on end. It's been extremely enlightening. You know, I'm wondering for our listeners who are taking away so many valuable pieces of information, what is the best way that someone can connect with you? What would you recommend?
Well, they can find me. My favorite platforms are LinkedIn and Instagram. So that's where I'm the most active. I share different content on both of them, and I don't, share my cappuccino. I try to share tools that people can really use to embrace the conversation we've just had, right? So whether you're a parent or you're in a relationship, or lots of my work is in leadership. the how-tos and content and ebooks and just stuff that helps change the world. So they can find me at Mimi Nicklin, which is my name on the screen, or they can go via my website, which is empathyeverywhere.co.
Love
Great.
it.
Amazing.
Love it.
Thank you so much, Mimi. It's been really great to chat with you today.
Yes, thank you for having me and making me laugh and talking about knickers before I've even had my coffee. This podcast history. Thank you, ladies.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast. If we can leave you with a thought, what did you hear from our guest Mimi about empathy in the workplace and leadership that you are going to take forward? If you like this episode, we would be so grateful if you can share it with your friends and tag us on social media at Leading Ladies Who Lunch. Your reviews of this podcast mean so much to us. We'd love it if you can rate it and subscribe to the show.
Remember, you can find us and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. Subscribe to stay up to date with the latest episodes and follow us on Instagram at Leading Ladies Who Lunch.
Stay tuned for another great episode in 2 weeks.
Until then, stay sassy. Thank you for joining us on the empowering journey at the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast. We hope you've enjoyed our insightful discussions, actionable strategies, and inspiring stories that we break down during each episode. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to Leading Ladies Who Lunch on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And remember, the conversations you've heard on this podcast are just the beginning of your journey. Let your voice be heard, inspire change, and continue breaking barriers as you lead with authenticity, resilience, and unwavering determination.
Until next time, keep embracing your leadership potential, challenging the norms, and shaping a better world for women in the workplace. Leading Ladies Who Lunch, empowering women, changing lives.